Puss in Boots. Once there was a poor miller who had 3 sons and very little else. When the old miller died, he left his mill to the eldest son. He left his trustworthy donkey to the middle son. The youngest son got the cat. The youngest son was upset over his poor share. My older brothers can work together to earn a living, he said, but Puss and I will surely die of hunger. The cat overheard the boy. Don't worry, said Puss in Boots. Just give me a sack and a good pair of boots so I can walk through the mud and brush, and you will see that I can be a great help to you. The boy did what the cat asked. Then Puss got his boots. He pulled them on and strutted around. Then Puss put his new sack over his shoulder and walked to the edge of the woods where many rabbits lived. Puss picked tender grass and fresh thistles and put them in the sack. Then he lay down as if he were dead and waited. A plump young rabbit soon hopped along and smelled the fresh thistles. He crawled into the bag to eat. Puss jumped up and closed the bag. He brought the rabbit to the king. Puss was led into the king's throne room. He bowed and said, "Sire, I bring you this gift from my kind master, the Duke of Carabas." The king did not know that Puss had just made up this name for a boy. "Tell your master," said the king, "that I thank him and accept his gift with pleasure." With that, Puss went on his way. The next day, Puss caught 2 partridges to present to the king. The king was pleased and said, "Thank your generous master, the Duke of Carabas. He is most kind." For many weeks, Puss brought various gifts to the king. The king began to wonder about this mysterious Duke of Carabas. One day, Puss found out that the king was taking his daughter for a drive along the river. Puss said to his master, "Go down to the river, take off your clothes, and get in. Leave the rest to me." The boy did as he was told. Then Puss hid the clothes under a big stone. When the king's coach came along, Puss ran into the road and cried out, "Help, help, my master! The Duke of Carabas is drowning. The king ordered that his guards rescue the Duke. The princess watched the guards pull the boy from the river. Puss told the king that horrible robbers had stolen all his master's clothes and had thrown them in the river down drowned. The king wanted to help. He ordered one of his guards to ride back to the palace and bring the Duke a dry set of clothes. Dressed in a fine suit of clothes, the boy did indeed look like a duke. The princess thought he looked handsome. When the Duke of Carbis looked at her, the princess smiled back. The king asked the Duke to ride with them. Meanwhile, Puss went ahead of the royal carriage to carry out his plan. He spoke to the farmhands cutting hay in a field. When the king comes along, you must tell him that this field belongs to the Duke of Carbis. If you don't, the ogre who lives in a castle on the hill will chop you into tiny pieces. Sure enough, when the king drove up, he asked a farm hand who owned the land. The Duke of Carbis, they answered. A little farther down the road, when the king asked more farmhands who owned the land they were working, they all answered the same thing, the Duke of Carbis. And so it went everywhere. The king asked, he was everywhere. The king asked, he was told that the land belonged to the Duke of Carbis. The king was amazed at how much land the Duke owned and how wealthy he was. The Duke of Carbis and the king thought, now that is a name I surely intended to remember. The princess, who was sitting beside the Duke in the carriage, was not paying much attention to the Duke's wealth. She gazed into his eyes during the entire journey. The Duke and the princess talked and talked. By now, the princess felt she loved the Duke. He in turn fell in love with the princess. While the princess and the Duke talked and got to know one another, Puss went ahead to get Puss went ahead to the ogre's castle. He was a very rich ogre. He owned all the surrounding land and had heaps of treasure hidden away inside the castle. The horrible ogre was also said to have special powers. He could change into any animal at all, but Puss had a plan and would ask to see the ogre's powers for himself. When Puss got to the castle, he asked to see the ogre. Then Puss boldly said, I have heard of your powers too. Change yourself into any animal at all, even a lion or an elephant. It is true, roared the ogre. as he changed into a fearsome lion. Puss leaped up onto a cupboard. He jumped down when the ogre turned himself back into an ogre. Puss told the ogre that he was very frightened. Then he said, "I have heard that you can also change yourself into a very tiny animal, even a mouse, but that's impossible." "What's impossible?" roared the ogre. Ogre, "Not impossible for me." In the blink of an eye, he changed himself into a mouse. Puss wasted no time. He pounced on the mouse and ate it. As the mouse was gone, so was the ogre. Meanwhile, the king's coach had arrived at the castle. Puss ran out to welcome the king and the princess. Puss bowed and said, "Welcome to the castle of the Duke of Carbaz." "Don't tell me this fine castle is yours, dear Duke," exclaimed the king. The Duke merely smiled and led the king and the princess into the great hall. The king, the princess, and the Duke and Puss enjoyed a splendid feast. Then the king offered the charming Duke his lovely daughter's hand in marriage. The Duke and the princess were married that day. As for clever Puss, he lived a life of ease in the castle ever after.